Hero Club presents Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu.
Welcome to Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu, episode 99. I am your co-host, co-creator, Wheelchair 21. We are an episode away from our epic 100th episode, and on tonight's episode, we are going to be talking about originally the top 10 episodes of Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu. However, because we're practically at 100 episodes for L.I.T, we are doing the top 15. And joining me for this countdown is the guy who helped me practically make the list, besides Soundout 12, who could not make it tonight. It is the one and only Janitor Frickin' Joker.
Yo, I didn't even think we'd make it this far. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I thought we would have, at least killed each other by episode 2. But here we are, 99 episodes
crazy.
In. And,
we're in 99. We're in 99, yeah, exactly.
And we have a lot of moments that are very noteworthy.
Oh yeah, there's moments, but if we were to do a moment list, they would actually be a top 100 moments rather than that. We'd wait till we do actual episode 100 and do moments per episode. So it'd be like, alright, from episode number 1 all the way to 100 in chronological order. However, we're doing the top 15. So this was originally 10. Then when we saw how big our list of honorable mentions were, which usually honorable mentions are somewhere between 5 to at least a half of what your top is. So if, say, you have a top 10, it's usually 5 honorable mentions. If you have a top 15, it's somewhere between 5 and 8 usually, somewhere around there. And they're just, kind of lamented on. We'll get to those, though, eventually in this episode. So starting off, our top 15 is actually a two-parter. It is one of the only few episodes, I believe, in the entire series where it ran so long, I just had to cut it because I didn't want to put it up in one full burst. And I was like, this is too ridiculous. This doesn't give me enough time to edit and upload it when the mandate was back then to have an episode out almost every week, unless we were 8 episodes straight and then we'd go on a month hiatus. It's Los Ingobernables, episodes 33 and 34, Tokusatsu's Identity Crisis. This one was actually, I think, an unintentional recording discussion. This episode, I think, occurred due to me and Soundout and Darkon actually first starting out having our average Skype call, getting ready to record an episode. And then we just got really amidst a dialogue and discussion about Tokusatsu in general that I was like, yo, hold on, let me hold this note and let's start from sort of the beginning, which was at least 15 minutes into the discussion, and try to at least bring people up to speed with what we were talking about so we could just pick up where we had already begun. That's practically how this episode came to be. And the only thing about it that was original, pre-planned, was, I think, the Televicoon scans. I think we preempted the real topic, which I don't even recall was at that time. I just remember this being a 2-hour podcast.
It was Lupat.
Was it the Lupat news? I think so.
I think it was.
Because, I'm looking at the list, and it could have been a bit of the Lupat news, only because of another future episode on this list does mention Lupat, and it's around the same, I would say, numerical value, I want to say, but I could be wrong. Because I'm looking around, and yeah, because episode 28, where we mentioned Lupat, which is somewhere on this list, not telling people where, does bring up Lupat, and then about 3 to 5 episodes later, the toy scans did break. So I think originally it was going to be us discussing the toy scans. So foreshadowing, 28 somewhere on this list. And if you're not actually looking at the titles now to clue you in where it could possibly fall on this top 15, there you go. So, yeah, no, I remember this episode being very original and authentic. I remember I barely cut, I barely edited. I just took out anything that felt
those are some of the best episodes we do. Something just comes up and we're, inspired by it. I think one of the ones that's also on this list was basically what happened. It was just us discussing, for hours this specific topic. And it was a rabbit hole that we never wanted to leave.
Yeah, no, that's true too, because there are some episodes that are very authentic where I leave it practically untouched and I don't edit, especially back before I think episode 60 something, before I could actually properly figure out how to cut and take out a lot of the weird heavy breaths. A lot of people are going to notice in older episodes around 50 to 55, you start seeing that I'm able to starting to clip out a lot of the weird emphasis of us wheezing, breathing, coughing, stuff like that. Like, I'm able to actually get in there a bit better and clean that stuff up. But from this episode, it was a very naked episode. I think from that original clip of looking at the original audio files, I think I only deleted probably about 20 minutes worth of a 2 hour and 50-minute discussion maybe. Because I remember I broke it up into like 2 episodes of almost 90 minutes. And I remember like I only took maybe out of the master recording 20 minutes out. So that's like a huge ass. Yeah, if you think about it, it was like a 3-hour podcast and I took like maybe 20 minutes out at most and almost split them and did like evenly 90. I tried to set them as even as I could, even though that's not 90 minutes per se since I cut it down. But that's what I could assume happened. But overall, I do think a lot of people should check it out, especially at that time. Some of our views hadn't changed as much, only due to the fact that around the episode 30 mark, Soundout and Darkon hadn't even watched as much Ultraman as I had at the time. But we did talk in depth about Garo. We did talk in depth about Metal Hero and the basic Toei structure at hand, which is practically the majority of the fan base.
It's an interesting topic to talk about, especially like when we talked about the burnout. Like this could be just a precursor to what the burnout episode was leading up to.
Exactly, especially when you listen to this episode and other episodes that are on this list. And you go in depth and hear them. So let's go to number 14, episode 59, Hazard Level 5.9, Not Enough Love and Peace. Now, for those of you who might not remember this was, I think, our first full in-depth series review that had more than 2 people doing a series review. Not even a movie, I mean a series. Like, it had myself, Mucha, Soundout, and I think even Visible Ninja.
I think he was on there. If not, he was on there briefly. I think I distinctly remember his voice being there.
Yeah, and we did the entire series of Kamen Rider Build. Not the movies, but we did talk about the full series. Now, there are other episodes where we have done series reviews before that point, but this was the first to have more than 2 hosts. This went almost 2 hours of us breaking down all 3 arcs of the show. Some of the things I find funny about it is this was either the precursor or the catalyst to the spinoff that was Mike and Mike in the Morning with You. Like, this was either one of the episodes, or it was the following episode. Because when I looked at the recording list, it brought up, like, those first few episodes in the notes when I was searching our actual
Yeah, it was at the end of this episode that we were continuing to talk still. And that's when you kind of left us and me and Soundout together, and we just started talking.
Yeah.
And history was made, sort of.
Because, like, the funny thing I remember about this episode, for people who don't know or have already seen Ghost and want just a little bit of the Cliff Notes version, we make a lot of jokes regarding IGN's reviewing style when we were saying about how Build, when it started, really captivated us, but as the show went on, we either had a love-hate relationship with the show, so we always kept saying that there wasn't enough love and peace, there wasn't enough this or that the show started with, and it then eventually ended with. We even took a lot of pop shots at how Evil is actually a very underwhelming villain with this huge, great charisma. He's just overly underwhelming. I know one of the biggest things we talk about is when they had the amazing fight in the rain with no sounds. Yeah. And we had a huge Q Ranger tangent. And we had the Geo.5 episode tangent, which, as I'm saying, it had to be the Mike and Mike inspiration, especially with this episode when everything lines up at that time. Because this episode is still a good review. Even if you straight on love Build, you'll still enjoy this video because we do point out we still enjoy elements of the show. While we don't necessarily like it at the end, we did actually enjoy it.
Like it's like we enjoyed some aspects to it, but some of its shortcomings kind of stand out a bit too much for us to really love it.
Exactly. So I think people who really love it going into this, you might feel attacked, but you shouldn't. I don't think we were very aggressive about it. We were more
I think we were kind of
approaching it.
Yeah, we weren't really. That's the thing. I think a lot of viewers, like not speaking about us, but in general, might come off a little angry towards things, and that's kind of like their mindset. They don't like it, so they come off angry. I feel like if you want to really have people appreciate the review and kind of be interested, you gotta like approach it in a way that like lacks. You can't be too aggressive. You can't be too chill about it. You gotta just take it as it is. Exactly. You can't just go like, fuck Build. We don't like that show and we hate it. Evolt sucks, but he does suck. But that's beside the point. It's all about taking it in a way that makes it entertaining for the audience and for people that like and don't like the show.
All right, and with that, let's go to number 13, Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu, episode 91, Low Jor Battle Nizer, the first Mega Monster Battle. Now, this episode was, I think, an ass pull moment where we needed an episode of filler. And I was like, well, enough of us have watched enough Ultraman series by now that isn't myself or Mucha, where we could easily just pick monsters that we like and form Battle Nizer teams based on the Mega Monster Battle series and their Nizer system. And that led to actually a really fun show that was really short and easy to edit and compose between myself, Mucha, Soundout, and Metal. One of the things I like about this show is the fact that while it is the most recent, we are putting it a lot lower on this list because it's very, very recent and a lot of people know it's fresher in their memories. Another thing I do like about it is that we did pick a lot of random ones that are also very iconic to the main Ultra community as well as the average casual. So, Mucha, what's your take on Load Your Battle Nizer?
Oh, that was a fun episode. I love kaiju, and having us discuss our ideal or an ideal kaiju team from Ultraman is just, well, it's a fun aspect to really explore, especially when you talk about the evolutions and the riser forms and stuff like that. And not only that, it also shows how our group, specifically Soundout and maybe Metal, has progressed in terms of Ultraman. We know that Ultraman isn't exactly the most talked about toku on Twitter. It's usually Rider and maybe Sentai. But Ultraman's kind of in the back way. It has its audience, but it's very niche. But then we do an episode about Ultraman and it shows how far we've come in terms of what Ultraman is really into the public eye of the Tokusatsu community in America. It's now people recognize it. People realize how cool it is and how fun it can be. It can tell interesting stories and has cool monster designs as well as cool action scenes.
Yeah, exactly, because around the time, this was when the height of the moment of the Mill Creek releases were imminent. And on top of that, we had the fact that we had several people even hyping up the Mill Creek releases. We have it that Ultraman is being more talked about, at least on Twitter, from the people I follow. I see a lot more people now openly talking about it. And so with that, let's move on to our next episode, which actually regresses a bit, because for number 12, it is episode 90, Lit versus Lou Pat.
That's the cops
coming. Series review. Yeah, the cops gonna chase you up wherever you are. Okay, so this was our Lupin Ranger versus Pat Ranger review. Interestingly enough, we did do the movies on a separate episode a little while after. I think it was episode 95, but we're just specifically talking about episode 90. This is an episode where I think we did go over a bit between myself, Soundout, and Metal, but it wasn't as, I'd say, elaborately over as Build went, with almost being 2 hours and 20 minutes before being cut down to almost 2 hours. What was good about this was we addressed it more as, what did you think about the story? What did you think about the characters? What did you think about the aesthetic of the toy and gimmick? And I think that flowed a lot better with the show than breaking it down by arc by arc by arc, and it worked a lot smoother, personally, as a producer and editor. And I really enjoyed that with Lupin Ranger versus Pat Ranger. We talked about it as enjoying the show, but similar to Build, having issues where we were pissed off how production either treated certain characters or treated its story or progressed the story in a way that it just felt like not all the pieces came together for a perfect puzzle, but it at least came out on what was considered a solid ending. So, Mucha, your take?
Yeah. Man, I wish I was on that episode, because I think discussing Lupat is a pretty interesting topic in itself, considering what happens in the show and outside of the show in terms of production. It was a nice approach. I feel like it was a lot easier for you guys to talk about because of that. It's very kind of episodic. There is no arc system to Lupat. It's either this episode happened, this episode happened, this episode happened, and then sometimes it fits into the serialized story, and sometimes it's an episodic story. And I feel like it allowed you guys to talk about it much easier than what Bill did, because Bill was arc system, like anime. Lupat felt like an actual Tokusatsu show, if that makes sense. I wish I was there to talk about it, because I have my thoughts about Lupat. I think it was a nice little love letter to the older times of Sentai, but it still had its shortcomings as well. I wasn't personally a fan of what happened to Zamigo in the end. I wasn't really a big fan of the super form, but I did like the cast. I feel like the cast really carried that show to keep me watching, and I think that's a very important aspect of Tokusatsu shows that people don't really discuss, is the cast and the chemistry that the cast has. If they don't have something to keep drawing you in and charisma to keep your eyes on the screen, then you're kind of losing your audience by not having that.
And that's a perfect way to end it, because we're going to talk about bleeding your heart out. Because for number 11, it's episode 10, How to Get into Ultraman. This episode was me and Mucha practically discussing at the time when Ultraman seemed very bleak, even though it had so many shows coming to Crunchyroll at the time, or that were already there. the fact that how the fandom always kind of gives Ultraman the cold shoulder. At that point in time, Ultraman was still getting made fun of, joked about, even though it had an official streaming deal with Crunchyroll. And in this episode, I actually misremember this one a little bit. I often remember it as being me, Mucha, Alex, but it's not actually me, Mucha, and Alex or Sentai Bandicoot. It was me, Mucha, and Project. I completely forgot Project was on this episode. I can't believe I forgot that. And the funny thing about it is it's a cool retrospective of seeing how everyone now in Hero Club really loves Ultraman. You got Darkon, you got Project. He already liked Ultraman, but now he's reinvested himself into the series. You have Soundout fully invested, you have Metal fully invested, and it's really funny how we're now more Ultra side. A lot of people are more Garo side, a lot of people are old. We've seen enough Showa side to know what we do and don't like about the common denominator when it comes with Sentai or Rider. That it's interesting that you take almost 2 years ago and you see how different the landscape was with not just us as hosts, but as friends of what we liked and what we didn't like. And it completely changed and flipped on its head where you have this episode here where I, being the real Ultra diehard, preached a lot about it. Because I remember there were parts where, when it came to at the time of Hero Club's beginning around this time, you were probably at least the second most informative when it came to Ultra series, but I was still the top dog. So there were even parts where you were picking my brain because I had seen some of the more philosophical, crazy stuff.
That's how I approached the episode. I approached it as like I was interviewing you and how to get into Ultraman, since you were the bigger Ultraman fan than me at the time. And I feel like that worked out pretty well because I
really enjoyed that episode too in retrospective because you did treat it like you were interviewing me per se. It was interesting.
It's like an exchange between like someone who's new and doesn't get it to someone who's experienced, and how that someone with experience can get someone who doesn't know anything about it into the show. I feel like that's kind of like how our exchange happened. I feel like that's a good like representation of like how a fan of Ultraman could help one of their friends get into Ultraman.
Yeah, because in that episode when I watch it, I still, in a sense, preach, or should I say, I still have that mindset of how Ultraman should be or how people should see Ultraman. Because it's one of those things of, I feel like that part for me hasn't changed as much. I'm a little bit laxer in some ideology than I was then 2 years ago, but I still hold to some of the things I said then to now. So let's go on to 10. Yeah, we're finally getting out of our first 5.
We're finally out of there. Now we're in the Hell Zone grenade.
Yeah, practically. We're going to episode 58, Our Adventures at Power Morphicon. Now this episode starts off on actually a sad note because we intended to actually have this episode almost immediately after we got home from the convention. However, we got hit with a huge tragedy where our friend Francisco Rodriguez, better known as Seraph at Hirotaku, at his own website, The Broken Infinite, and a few other online sites, died. He died of pneumonia. He already had very failing health here and there, but he was still kind of moving on. He just got pneumonia, boom. And when he passed, a lot of us just kind of eased up. We did mostly site work, editorial stuff, news coverage, and we just couldn't really bring ourselves to really record, but we wanted to at least open up with a bit of a memoriam to him before we went right into the recap of what happened when me and Soundout went to Power Morphicon 2018. In addition, this was also the same episode around that time where Bandai announced the huge wallet killer known as the Complete Selection Modification Kamen Rider Kuga Oracle, which I did buy with most of my Christmas and birthday money later the following year, which would have been year. Yeah, this exact year. So, what I want to bring up are some cliff notes from that story. The joke that me and Soundout kept calling my scooter the Rabbit, because literally it was red, it was fast. We made a lot of good friends there. We already seen a lot of our friends we hadn't seen in ages. We hung out with Stephen Lunsford, aka Kit Taylor, Kamen Rider Dragonite, quite a lot. And this is probably, out of all the episodes on our list, probably one of the 2 that I listened to the most. So, Mucha, your thoughts hearing the PMC stories?
It was a very entertaining moments to hear. I mean, as I said, I wish I was there with you guys at Power Morphicon. Maybe one year I'll be with you guys and we have our stories to tell. But yeah, it's just fun to hear like different con stories, especially with something that you love, like Power Morphicon, and just the different experiences that you can endure. Because I know you tell me other stories that happen at different cons, different Power Morphicons and stuff like that. And just hearing them is kind of an entertaining moment in itself. Even though you're not even there, it's just fun to hear what actually happened. It's like hearing a funny D&D story or something like that.
Yeah, exactly, because there's stuff like that. You gotta go back and hear some of these episodes or older discussions where we talk about con stories. This is the only con story I think ever shared on the show, per se, but there's probably gonna be more in our future. So, number 9 is an infamous episode that also ties into Mike and Mike in the Morning. Lit 63, the one about Shirakura's tweets. If anyone doesn't remember, this is all about Shirakura freaking out over Kamen Rider Geo at the time, because people saw the leaks to the toy catalog, people
and started tweeting about it.
Yeah, and on top of it, it wasn't just the toy catalog, it was episode guides got leaked out or something regarding what was going to happen in those arcs, so people knew who the special guests were before TV Asashi's website could officially reveal it, and it was like a field day, because that was most of the episode. Other than that, and us talking about SHF Kiva finally coming out. That was probably a huge essential part in that story, was just everyone knew what was happening before Shirakura, tweeting at Shirakura, who was also weirdly engaging with the fans, and it also was a part that played into episode 98 a little bit, and when I mean that, I just mean Kiva in his own right, the SHF being made. So, Mucha, your thoughts on the infamous Shirakura story?
As you know, we weren't supposed to know about Trinity. That's like the defining moment of that interaction. Where someone's like, so what about this Trinity form in ZO? You weren't supposed to know about Trinity. But then everybody starts making the joke, oh wait, does he mean the Agito thing? Is he fucking with us? Is he messing with us? It was an ordeal, to say the least, to see, like, Shirakura, the actual producer of freaking ZO, interacting with the fandom, and the fandom just, well, some people not taking the moment and utilizing it. Instead, they kind of show their naivete, to put it nicely. But it was a fun ride.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments, because, like, Shirakura still is talking to people, and I don't know why he is. I mean, it's great that he's talking to people.
Takatera still talks to people.
Yeah, but Takatera's a lot nicer, if I recall.
Well, he wasn't nice to Red Racer that one time.
Listen, Red Racer got what he deserved. So, number 8, we're going to Lit 51, SRR. Sequel, Reboot, Remove. Now, we did 2 of those on the episodes. One was a Sentai one, which was Bioman, Gal Ranger, Shinkenger. The Kamen Rider portion was Stronger, Ryuki, Deno. I remember feeling more kicked in the dick with the Sentai portion than I did with the Rider portion, if I recall. I just remember that episode being hilarious because it was like none of us had really matching statements. I think we all had like the best possible inverse of all 3. It was like, I don't think any of us
we were all over the place. No one had like a unified idea.
Yeah, I think it was like, you would say sequel to Bioman, where I'd be like, remove Bioman, and Sound would be like, reboot Bioman. It was like, no one had a match. I think no one had a match except in the Rider portion. It was the Sentai one that was the most chaotic one.
Yeah, chaotic good. It was a fun exchange of ideas, and I wouldn't mind doing it again. You take shows that you really like or really hate, and you really think about, like, what would I do with this situation? Would I reboot Ryuki? I actually would reboot Ryuki, because I think it was a very influential show to Kamen Rider. I just wish it was a bit better. Would I want a sequel to Bioman? Hell yeah, I want a sequel to Bioman. I think Bioman's great, and I think it could be continue on with, especially with the new technology that we have in this day and age. But just because I think that doesn't mean someone else might not think that. Someone might think, I think Bioman should be rebooted and told in a fresh new way. And I think most of us agreed to remove Deno. I think, if I remember correctly. I know I did.
Yeah, I don't remember that one. I only remember mainly the Sentai portion. I completely forgot the Rider portion. Because we quickly went through the Rider one. We easily breezed through that.
I think most of the discussion was over the Sentai stuff, because I think that really was most engaging. And then we just talked about Rider.
All I know is the irony is we do plan to do another sequel, reboot, remove on episode 106 of Volume 2.
Volume 2 of the show that never ends.
Exactly. So, pick number 7. This is even funnier because it's like the thing where we did 91, then went to 90. Yeah, we're going to episode 50. Take to the Skies as Conventions Are Coming. Now, the interesting thing about this episode is we did open with news. This was at the time when the Jetman DVDs got announced, and all of us were dumbfounded. We did not see this announcement coming. We were kind of like, you sure about that? Are you kidding us, fam?
You sure, champ?
Yeah.
You sure about that, champ?
Exactly. And then we went and made our own conventions. These conventions were just an idea of what would be your dream lineup of guests to be at your own convention if you could ever afford one. And interestingly enough, I think me and Soundout had the most reoccurring groups unintentionally. Some of it was intentional because of our interests, but I think we had the most repeats compared to Mucha or Metal on the show.
Yeah, I think that's just because I wouldn't know who I would really bring, because I enjoy a lot of people. So just picking one and narrowing down would be quite the task for me, because I enjoy a lot of actors and actresses and directors and producers.
What's also funny about that is we do plan to also do a Create-A-Con 2, and at the moment now, it's penned in at being episode 103 of Los Ingobernables.
When you said Create-A-Con, I thought you meant like, let's create like a new Autobot or Decepticon. I was just like, wait a minute, this escalated quickly. Now we're making Transformers.
I thought you were going to say, let's be like Kamen Rider Super 1 and Create-A-Con, where we embezzle $20,000 or $100,000 out of our fan club.
Shh, don't we talk about that, Wheels.
We talk about it now. Anyways, pick
Mothra.
number 6. We're doing Lit 81. Tokusatsu Oh My Gaga. This is when we did the J-drama tribute based on the actual manga of the same name, Tokusatsu Gaga. We looked at the actual J-drama series review, which was actually having all of its Tokusatsu scenes composed and directed through Toei, even though another studio practically did the entire main bulk of the series at hand, with your characters from the manga being adapted to live action. This episode is actually a really great one, especially due to the fact that all of us really love this take, this comedic little venture on the love of tokusatsu and genre seen in a manga to live action format. And we really wished it continued and wasn't such a short kind of one-off series. But it did hit its mark right on the head, I think.
Yeah, like Tokusatsu Gaga, I did not know what to expect going in. And the results are very insightful and I guess very powerful from the perspective of like us fans, because it's about people that are very much more mature, experiencing life, like going to work and stuff, but also being a fan of something that's very niche and something that's not really looked at as something that you should really still like. And to have that reality hit you and how her experiences kind of mirror what you do, only very exaggerated, like very out there. And it's just very, I don't know how to put this in the nicest way, but it's very mind-opening, I guess. How we're adults and we still go through these problems that this lady's going through, even though they're the most ludicrous things ever. It makes sense to us because we know that situation. We've been there. We don't want people to really know that we like this certain thing because we don't know how they're going to react. And then once we dive even deeper to like her family troubles with her mother and that feeling of like, why did she stop liking tokusatsu to begin with? And then her fire being reignited by old memories and what watching that show did for her as a child and how they came back to her now as an adult. I think that's kind of like why we still watch this stuff to this day. It's because we still remember that feeling. It still leaves an impact on us no matter when it is or what it is. It still provides us with that same sense of fulfillment that we get when we were a child.
Exactly, and that's why I really did enjoy the show, and we want you guys to go check out our review of the series. We also suggest that if you haven't seen the episode when it first went up, that you should go watch the episodes before you see our podcast or listen to our podcast, because we hold nothing back. We spoil practically 90% of the show.
The show also reminded me when I first watched Akiba Ranger Season 1. Like that feeling of like you don't know what to expect, but the result is just like, shit, that's like a slap to my face. Damn, I love it.
Yeah, and when they add in the campy tropes of a manga/series targeted for girls, it hits them right on the head. We're like, oh no, they're hallucinating. Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Anyways, since we are getting to our final 5 picks, let's look at our honorable mentions now. These honorable mentions will be read off in chronological order rather than placement. These are ones that either just didn't make it, either due to other topics overweighing it, or the fact that they were just special episodes that we remember and we wanted to lightly touch upon. One of the reasons that the Tokusatsu Hero Draft isn't anywhere on there was we thought it was too damn good that it would automatically just body everything else and be number one. So we wanted to put that in honorable mention. We think that the major draft episodes in future seasons and series are just going to be honorable mentions because they're too easy to put on this list. That's the best way to say it. They're
too like while of a time already, because we're all discussing like different things about why we put this person on our team, and then we all just get at each other's throats because that's what we do when you pick our character that we wanted and you motherfuckers just steal it from us. It's the ultimate combat.
So, in chronological order, we gotta go with episode 1. We purposely made it in Spanish just as a joke. It was a rib, and people took it too seriously. They saw the title in Spanish, the description in English, but they couldn't register that we wrote the description in English because we were still speaking English in the episode. We even make fun of the fact that we call it Comencinos no tan humilde, meaning humble beginnings. It was a joke in and of itself with the whole Los Ingobernables, and no one got it. It was the weirdest thing, because I saw so many people that weren't our major friends and fans that followed our internet career so long go, why is it in Spanish? For some reason, it went right over their heads. Episode 8, exceed into the abyss is actually Mucha's first time on the episode. What ended up happening was we were supposed to record, then go on a break, if I recall correctly. And Project was nowhere to be found. Olga was nowhere to be found because Olga was going to be a guest host if necessary. So then Mucha was like, well, I'm supposed to be a host in a little bit anyways, because we were originally planning out a storyline or lore, a canon to the episode.
Yeah, like I was supposed to appear in episode 17 or something.
Yeah, because it was supposed to be a reference to when Burai first showed up. But then Mucha had to be called in early because we couldn't find Project. And
I was drafted early.
Yeah, so we had this amazing episode about just us, I think, talking about Televikun scans and whatnot. The next episode is actually our tribute to the actor who played Daigo in Gosei Sentai Die Ranger, and that was called Puppets, Peacocks, and Cacti, the Daigo story, episode 14. This is a nice tribute where we look at the majority of his love with Kujaku, the character's love with Kujaku, and that was our way to pay tribute to his focus the
episodes where he had a very good arc in Die Ranger.
Yeah, I think the only issue with that episode was we did tangent on how everyone had these weird arcs, and they were just kind of all over the place.
I think that's also where we discussed where the idea of how fans think that every Sentai should have the characters focused equally. I think we had that discussion a little bit.
It was that episode and a few others that we've had that ongoing discussion. We cycle through some often. Another interesting episode is episode 18, Metal Heroes and Crossovers. This was because I think at the time Space Squad was just announced, or it was coming out on home video, and me and Mucha wanted to talk about if you could just randomly make your own version of a Metal Hero crossover with a Sentai or a Rider, what would they be? And I think it was mostly Sentai based, but we did come up with a few interesting ones like Jiraiya meeting the Hurricanegers or the Shinkengers and the Ninjas and et cetera, so on and so forth, like a Ninja War or just a feudal era Japan kind of storyline. We also have episode 21. This is, I think, the first time we actually had Soundout on an episode, Animated Toku Switcheroo. This was more or less an idea of having anime and tokusatsu. If you could take a tokusatsu series and give it a full mangaka series, and take an anime and give it a full tokusatsu series, how would you do it? This was in light of either the Kamen Rider manga being announced or SSS Gridman.
I think it was SSS Gridman, yeah.
It was one of the two, because they were around the same time when they announced the Kamen Rider double manga.
Yeah, I think it was both of them and how they were like, wow, that's actually not a bad idea. Maybe we could try to integrate other shows into it.
Exactly. Then we have episode 61, Brave Kaiju and Derailments. This was an episode, I think, around Halloween where I wanted us to talk about, I think, Gamera the Brave and just Kaiju in general. There was a discussion where pretty much Mucha and Project were just completely out of it and they didn't care. Like, Mucha just wanted to get right to Gamera the Brave, the movie, and Project just didn't give a rat's ass. That was the biggest thing about it.
You were so bad in that episode.
You guys really were. And then Soundout was completely confused.
Yeah, but it did give us the iconic line of, like, Godzilla has diabetes. That means Gamera's going to be a prison bitch.
Yeah, that's probably the highlight of that episode is when we get to the review about Gamera and how he's the friend of all children. We're like, that doesn't sound right in American society.
Yeah.
And then finally, like we said, it is the Tokusatsu Hero Draft, and as Mucha nicely put it, wars were waged over who gets to keep what.
I mean, I remember when Soundout tried to draft Emmer Jason, and we're like, hell the hell no.
I think you were the one. I thought you were the one who tried.
No, he tried to draft Emmer Jason. I was going to draft Emmer Jason, but then he did it first.
Okay, that's right. Because there were a few times where I had to throw the flag at you and him. There were like a couple times where I was like, no.
That robot that I picked.
Yeah, I just sit there and I was like, I don't think he's sentient. And you're like, he's sentient. And I'm like, no, he's not, Mucha. Me and Project had to research that for 5 whole minutes.
Listen, I just need a giant mech, okay?
Just wait till we get to the villain draft. It's going to be way redunculous. And with that, though, that were our honorable mentions. Let's get back, though. We're now to our final 5 picks. And in pick 5, we have episode 11, Kamen Rider, Thy Name is Metal Hero. Interestingly enough, before we actually got to the main discussion, we talked about the upcoming Gundam Build Fighters OVAs, because me and Project got really hyped because we liked the Build Fighters at the time. I think Mucha didn't actually go and watch Build Fighters for like another year and a half after this. It was like forever. It was just like a year later, Mucha's like, so Wheelz, I watched Build Fighters. That show was great. I really love Zeta. Is Zeta great? Do you love Zeta, Wheelz? And it was like the funniest thing ever. The rest of the episode, though, is myself, Mucha, Project, and Alex discussing the issues where in the first 10 Kamen Rider series, it wasn't that noticeable, but as we got into Heisei Phase 2, it became very noticeable that Metal Hero was still afoot or alive, technically, in the name known as Kamen Rider. It was one of those weird things where we really pointed out how in the conversions of the Heisei era, they started sneaking in a lot of old Metal Hero tropes alongside Showa tropes and just creating new ones at hand. I do remember we didn't actually target or attack Shirakura as much until we got to like around Zio. Zio was around the time where it became more relevant who was at fault here, and it was technically Shirakura.
I thought it was an interesting discussion because how we've been saying, well, at least the fandom's been saying how Metal Heroes should be coming back, or we need to have like a third Tokusatsu out there. But Metal Heroes can't really stand out now because Kamen Rider already took most of their tropes with them. Even right down to, I guess, now giant mecha forms that the writers can access to fight giant CGI monsters that they shouldn't be really doing unless they know what they're doing, but they don't because it's Toei. I mean, look at 01. 01 may be Reiwa, but it definitely has what Heisei has become, with like Breaking Mammoth and its giant satellite that becomes a robot for the hero to use, or Zio, where it has like the time machine that's also a robot that the hero can use. I mean, we can't really have Metal Heroes if Kamen Rider has already taken what they do.
Yeah, and I remember at the time, our biggest focal point was the fact that one of the Heisei writers, specifically Drive, was a metal hero. Even Denno was essentially a metal hero. They were Train Warrior and Carman. And how metal hero is that? And then you also had Gaim, who was a Shogun/Samurai armor, and made me go, Jiraiya. So it's one of those things of, Rider was really weird in the Heisei era, specifically Heisei Phase 2 the most, and at that tipping point with Denno onwards. I felt like someone looked and was like, well, they ain't ever coming back, so we might as well integrate them into our shows now. And that's what I essentially felt was going on.
Even now, Kamen Rider is now using weapons. I mean, do you remember when Kamen Rider was just a guy that used his arms and legs and just did kicks and bike stuff? Now he's just like, oh, I got a sword now, I'm gonna put my gimmick in that sword and gonna cut people in half.
Yeah, that's kind of the weird thing. But overall, I think for an early episode, it's still a fun episode. It's a little bit very talkative, very in-depth. It's not as comedic because we don't have a lot of names. At the time, I don't think we were really targeting producers. We weren't targeting writers. I think we barely focused on who was in control of the product too either, which is kind of funny when you think about it. Like, we did not.
I think we were just discussing what the Kamen Rider brand has become.
Yeah, I think it was mostly the brand rather than who's at fault here. Because when you talk to fans, they tend to always overlook Shirakura himself, because I always see fingers being pointed at the writers than they do the producers that hold the hand of Bandai or Bandai holds the hand of. And we always usually see Inoue and Kobayashi. However, in the last decade, they barely touched a writer series. They've barely done that, so you can't blame them anymore. Especially when we've had a lot of fresh blood doing stuff like
a lot of anime
Drive,
people,
Gaim, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's been a lot of anime people or just people that haven't had an experience in Tokusatsu. But it still feels like it's doing the same things that those other shows do, so it's definite that it's more of like a Toei and Bandai thing, at least at this point.
Exactly. So let's move on to another episode we're going to probably talk quite a bit about.
Oh god, this one.
Number 4, Lit 85, a crash course on Godzilla. This is a huge shitpost thanks to Cinemassacre. At the time, I wanted to do a video similar to this, but I didn't have a perfect template for it. And then at the time we were getting ready to record the video, James Rolfe, Cinemassacre, is like, yo, look at my video, my beginner's course on Godzilla. And he had like the perfect structured template. And I was like, I'll credit him, I'll thank him, and be like, yo, this is an ironic circumstance where I was trying to come up with a similar idea, but it wasn't gelling till someone put it on paper for me and go, I'm borrowing that, I'm adapting that, and let's do it. And that led to a really interesting take on everyone's standpoint on what makes Godzilla cool.
This episode was crazy. At least from my perspective, it was crazy just to discuss the different movies and ideas that we would recommend to people. I remember when I was just like, oh, I bet everybody's going to say like answers that I come up with in my head. So I'm going to pick answers that are completely off the rails and no one's going to expect it. And there were some that people did expect, but there was others that no one saw coming, like Godzilla versus Ebra or Godzilla versus Sea Monster. And that was my favorite one to talk about, to be honest, because of, well, where did everybody go? Where did everybody go? That was the highlight of the episode for me. But the more we discussed it and the more movies we brought up, like Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, Final Wars, Invasion of Astro Monster, the Kiryu Saga, other things that other movies and entries that people really like the 1990s version of Godzilla vs. Mothra. Like, it just shows that there's a wide variety of ways to get into the franchise, and there's not a specific movie that will instantly gravitate people towards making it a thing that they really enjoy. There's different ways and different entries that can do that for them.
Yeah, exactly, because that episode was really interesting. We had a lot of creative points. We had a lot of fun with it. Like you said, one of the biggest highlights is the infamous "Where did everybody go?" quote. Then there was the other infamous one about Schindler's List.
Oh
Of
yeah,
how
that
Godzilla
one.
would get the craziest sequels ever, because
Yeah,
there's so many comedic jokes on what hasn't Godzilla fought yet.
yeah. Godzilla and Schindler, battle for the list.
So
I
that
want that
episode
movie
is
now.
one that people need to go check out, because one, if you're not already into kaiju, this will help you even further. And on top of it, by the last 20 minutes, you're just going to think we're all ludicrous, with Mucha just coming up with one-liners and crazy ideas that either made it into the episode or didn't make it into the episode, depending on how I edited it.
Yeah,
So,
you bastard.
for our third, or should we say the top three, it's Lit 9. Don't Mess with Hirose, Die Ranger Edition. This episode, or this kind of series that we're going to do, was the first installment where we're going in reverse order of Yutaka Hirose's roles in Super Sentai, and we chose to go with Jin from Die Ranger. And we looked at the entire arc, we looked at the composition of what he brought as being a foil to Ryu, and how he had this interesting character development that turned him from a bad guy into technically an anti-hero?
Yeah, arguably, maybe anti-villain. It's debatable what he becomes. Like, he's not still a heroic being because of all the terrible things that he's done, but he did fight against the villains. But it was a great discussion, because Hideki Hirose is a great actor, first of all. And the roles that he brings into Tokusatsu are always very interesting and add a nice dynamic for, especially the Reds. It's usually the Reds that have to deal with this badass. And as a result, our Reds grow stronger, and us as the audience appreciate them more because they have to go through such a hellish ordeal to beat this man, because he's not going to let them have an inch.
And that's the thing, too, especially with at least the Jin saga. Like you said, he's not really reformed either, because he's murdered the love of his life. He was forced to murder his master first, then her, and he's been fully corrupted. He's still technically a hitman for hire. And by the time he's willing to die, I guess he wanted to try to sort of go out atoning for everything. But like you said, it doesn't feel like it was a full atonement, because it does come out of slightly left field after Ryu goes, "Oh, you've been my rival in martial arts, but I'm an assassin. I murdered people. I did this. I did that." And they kind of try to just sweep it under the rug, either because, as we know, at that time, Yutaka Hirose was sort of kind of bowing out of wanting to do Toei roles, supposedly. That's one of the reasons why he went and worked as a talent scout and agent for Toei's stunt team during those final years, because he came back as a on-screen role in Agito, but it wasn't in a stunt performance. But from what I understand is that when they brought him in as Jin, that was sort of like maybe his last hurrah, even though he stated, "I'll come back one day. This isn't the last you've seen of me." And I don't know if that's changed since then, but I would one day love that by the time that this actor fully retires from being a martial artist, stuntman, choreographer, director, that he comes back to Toei one final time and gets to be a Sentai team mentor and a Senshi. I want it to end that way.
That'd be interesting. I also had the idea of, speaking of like the Space Squad movies and space team-ups, I had the idea of like having 4 different sections dealing with like his 4 different types of villains brought back to fight against the new generation of heroes. Like,
dude, that would be the most perfect thing, the faces of Yutaka Hirose, and that's how you bring him back, is you just have all of his incarnations together, fighting the previous Sentais and the Metal Hero. So for number 2, it's the one that me and Mucha put personally on our list. Like, this is usually our number 1. This is our personal number 1. This is not the one that me, him, and Soundout agreed on, because we agreed that the number 1 episode had to consist of an episode where at least the majority of the 3 or 4 of us were on it. Yeah. So, number 2 is Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu, episode 13, Heroes and Concepts. This one we talked about unused, unmade concepts of Godzilla, which we've done on other episodes. We've done it, we've either planned it, and the idea is that when you do Heroes and Concepts, the idea is you have to talk about, usually create a hero, and you talk about unmade movies or ideas for storylines. And in this case, we did 2 of the most outrageous Showa movie ideas ever made.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about this, before we tell you what the titles of these films are, when we were doing the research for this episode to pick what concepts we wanted to do, because we wanted to start it with Godzilla, when Mucha and me were reading these and discovered these on Godzilla Wiki, on Toho Kingdom, on all the sites that verified that this stuff was real and existed, they weren't fan-made ones, we were so hysterical that when we found it, it was like 12:30, 1:15 in the morning. We were up till about 9 a.m. the next day. We went from there to there, 8 hours straight of us maniacally laughing, trying to fathom what we just read, and then trying to calm ourselves down only for us to get
The more we talked about
energized.
it, the more ludicrous it got.
Yeah, and then it led to us finally settling down to record this episode with Oga as our guest, because we wanted to have someone who didn't know about this at all reacting to us live as we read him off the alleged notes from the producers and writers originally working on the concepts, which was Godzilla vs. Robot Daughter and a Space Godzilla.
Yeah. Oh, God.
And the best way to summarize it is Robot Daughter was they were going to fight Godzilla with supposedly a, Metropolis-like mecha. Like, it was going to be based on the robot from Metropolis, with a fake flesh skin put over her, naked, that Godzilla would fall in love with, take back to his home, and then she'd, detonate, a super megaton bomb that was expected to kill Godzilla or seal him in some underground Hollow Earth cavern. Whereas a Space Godzilla dies of diabetes, gets turned into a rocket ship to send his child back into space to their alien homeworld.
Yeah.
Who came up with this shit? I don't know.
I lost it when we saw the artwork for Space Godzilla. Where Godzilla became the two-piece rocket, splitting off in 3 different sections in order to blast off into the planet that they're going to. And when Jesse saw that, he was just like, I'm done. No, Japan, stop. I'm not a fan of anything you made anymore. Oh, shit. The Bride of Godzilla.
That episode was that episode alone and those movies alone were so outrageous. Even Oga was just like, I'm done. I'm out of here. And the reason we had to bring on Oga was because Project was with us initially when we found these. And Project was like, I gotta tap out. And he legitimately tapped out.
He couldn't do it anymore.
He couldn't handle it. It was one of those ones where it was just so ludicrous. So if you know about these films and you want to hear our seldom reactions trying to calm ourselves down, go watch this episode. If you don't know anything else and want to know the full in-depth, word-by-word, supposed synopsis that we read off of their, I think, Wikizilla files, go enjoy them because they are ludicrous. They are amazing.
And shout out to Judas.
Oh yeah, we did bring up Judas on that episode because Shin Godzilla had come out, I think, on home video at that point, and we were discussing the crazy storyline that someone thought because it was some fan script that Anno put out on the internet years ago when he was in college or something.
It was some weird shit where somebody was just like, this is what's gonna happen in Shin Godzilla and all this shit. And clearly it was fake, but it was an amusing tale nonetheless. But it failed in comparison to freaking Bride of Godzilla and Space Godzilla, cause that was tame by comparison.
I still can't fathom that episode. However, we gotta get...
fever dream.
However, we gotta do number 1, which we already foreshadowed and leaked out. It actually is episode 28, if you recall. This episode is Super Sentai Fusion Up. Like I said, this episode I think had all 4 of us plus Sentai Bandicoot as our guest host. Interestingly enough, this idea came from actually Mucha and Alex watching Ultraman Orb and experimenting with the idea with Sentai, and that led to us wanting to do an entire episode where we just came up with wacky, crazy fusions. However, before we even got to us doing the main discussion, this is something very interesting in regards to the news on that episode. We looked at the Bandai of America San Diego Comic-Con sets for the Legacy line Fighting Spirit set, which was 3 Tommy action figures. And we also had our first inklings of the Lupat trademarks. We knew that at the time we were going to have the full title. It was the full title of Kaito Sentai Lupin Ranger versus Keisatsu Sentai Pat Ranger. And we had a huge discussion on just adapting Q Ranger, if it came over as Power Rangers, because at the time it felt like it was going to be Power Rangers before Hasbro took over. And we also had the whole idea of how could this thing work, since all we knew was that Phantom Thieves versus Cops. And it's a really interesting start to lead into, ironically, a series about fusions, since, ironically enough, when you look back in retrospect, there were 2 fusions in freaking...
Yeah, that was funny. It's funny how things work out, you know?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, what's your thoughts on this episode looking back? Because, I mean, there's only one thing that comes to my mind when I see Super Sentai Fusion Up.
Yeah, and I think it's the first thing that came to my mind, too. It's freaking Salesman.
Yeah, the sales or the tradesman. That's weird fusion of combining, I think it was Car Ranger and Akiba Ranger.
Yeah, he was just like, let's combine this. And then we started making the entire plot about how they sell things to the villains, and it's all faulty bullshit, and it keeps on just failing on them. But they can't do anything about it because the warranty won't let them.
It's the best pyramid scheme ever on how the good guys win.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate elaborate ruse for the villains to overcome. How are we going to defeat people that know how to make contracts? Oh no, how can we win? It's impossible.
Yeah, like, overall, that was probably the strongest one we came up with, because I remember we didn't really pick each other's brains for our ideas that we came up with individually outside of Soundouts, but I remember we all had really good solid picks. Just somehow the Akiba Ranger, Car Ranger one just got that ball rolling, where we went down a rabbit hole of enjoyment just creating a lore for these fake characters. And I also, like, since I had said I'd forgot about our introductory, like, news discussions, I find it just so ironic that by the time we did get to our top 10 list or top 15 list that it now is, ironically enough is when Lupat got announced, which ironically, when you think about it, episode 28 to episode 90 something, when we finally reviewed it, is like a huge gap of like 70 episodes. That's almost a huge span. That's over a half of the series.
It's like, man, we've really come a long way.
Exactly, like when you look at it, even though it's still episode 30, which means it was still essentially our first year of doing the show, you think about it as we progress, all of a sudden Lupat's like 90, and you're sitting there going, wow, there's like a 70, 60 difference in gap. And it's so ironic. On top of that, you also have the fact that we talked about how Bandai was in control of Power Rangers at the time. Look where they are now. They got nothing.
Like, I remember I was like, I only chose the teams that I made because I thought this is what Bandai would choose. Wait, well, this is going to be quite the interesting dilemma now.
It's one of those interesting things when you think about it, especially, like I said, when you look at the standpoint of us talking about a San Diego Comic-Con legacy set. Now we have the Lightning Collection, which is superior. We have the fact that they brought over Beast Morphers, which means there's a possibility that like a show like Tokyuger could be made, even though the fans are like saying, don't adapt it, don't make it. It could still be made.
The dog disagrees.
I know, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those ones of everything from episode 28, all of our thoughts going around at that time. If you looked at it then, came here now, so much has changed. Like I said, there's so many episodes where you see stuff has changed. And it's a good way of showing how much we've grown since then.
I don't know, Wheels. I don't think I've grown at all. I think like I'm even worse than before. Like I've caused more chaos than anything before.
That is 100% accurate. But overall, since this was our top 15 that you, Soundout, and I practically picked and sorted out, I think we did a good job. I know for people that actually listen to our show, they might have a difference of opinion. I know some of the ones that we did pick will be at least in their top 10 if they were to have one, or a top 15. I know that some of these ones, we had a real tough choice putting them in, because it was like, how do we make it feel evened out? Because we went from quite a lot of episodes between 1 to 30, and then it was mostly everything from like 65 onwards. It was like, wow, do we really hate the middle of the show? It was like...
We're basically like a Sentai series. Like our middle portion is just kind of like, apparently.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, huh.
But there's some good there. There's some good there.
No, there is. There really is. But I just couldn't at the time remember it. And I was looking through episodes, and just by their titles alone, I was like, I don't remember this one. I don't like this one, that one. And I think that was also a tough choice. Like, if we were to have people straight up decide, they would probably say go with the ones that are most listened to. But some of the ones that were our most listened to are some of the ones that I'm like, man, we were real assholes. I mean, to each other, not to our audience, but to each other on some of them.
I mean, that's going to be par for the course, I guess. But yeah, I get what you mean. It's very interesting to see how far we've come and what has happened since episode 28 and, well, since episode 1, really.
Exactly. So with that, like I said, I hope you guys that listened to this episode did enjoy our countdown. It's one hell of a show. We still have more coming in the near future. Like, once we're done with episode 100, we're going to take a small break. We'll be back with brand new episodes. Most of them are now going to be pre-recorded, because it's just a lot easier if I can just start editing them and throwing them up quicker and having them pre-scheduled. Because then it's like no worries about having to really take time off. So with that, we'll see you all in episode 100, which is the Villain Draft. I'm Wheelchair21.
Oh boy.
That was Janitor Joker. You can follow us on social media at those handles. You can always check out Hero Club at Hero Club for Life. And we'll see you all then, right?
Hopefully. Maybe if we don't die.
Exactly. If we don't die. So, until then, we'll see you next time.
And in the Book of Enoch it said, what killed the dinosaurs? It was diabetes.
You're welcome. Good night, everybody.
Hey, it's Wheelchair21, and thanks again for listening to an all-new episode of Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu. If you want to hear more content or see more content from the Hero Club YouTube channel, we're going to need you to subscribe, like, comment with some feedback, and share this channel with a friend. We also would like you to check out our website, hero-club.com, and follow us on various social media outlets just by looking up Hero Club for Life, as well as the stores you see are where we shop. Anyways, thanks again, and we'll see you all next time.